Practitioners and aficionados, welcome back to this thing of ours. These are the Chronicles of Gameology, and I am your host, Neil K. Marcellus, and that's Checkmate. Straight off the rip, as the title of this episode highlights and makes an argument towards, and that is the fact that being clueless about the process of mind over circumstances puts one at a disadvantage. But this revelation couldn't be more factual as to how squares and a lot of culture vultures have misinterpreted and all lives mattered and mangled the term which is known as the concept called game. Those of us who have been properly laced up and have undergone initiation that graduates a man from being on the front porch, we call individuals who I just pointed out kiosk game ambassadors who resemble a human version of a damn internet pop-up ad. These individuals are consistently on their damn soapboxes espousing and ranting and raving about how to put into practice this street philosophy. But you see, being seasoned about this street craft and its origins and oh, by the way, I did a whole episode that would give you a undisputable receipt and some historical context on this concept called game. Here's the link. Check it out once you finish viewing this episode. But being seasoned, one can tell by the very ranting and raving that these individuals preach that they have no clue as to what the hell they are talking about. Lay your eyes on this image I'm currently showing at this moment. See, here's the dealio. This concept called game is a philosophy that establishes a precedent. This standard is brought about by a man who has reconnected and have merged back into the power of his architect. This unshakable hand, this unmoved mover, which in this image is holding this torch, this enormous flame, which symbolizes a man's mental capacity, also referred to as one's crown capital, if they are a practicing practitioner of this craft. But this crown capital is a hierarchy made up of 7 levels. But a man's mental capacity, this flame, produces a steady and intense illumination, but only if a man has reconnected back with his architect, this unmoved mover. But this illumination shines, operates, and maneuvers through a man's perspective, which is represented here as a window frame, which also acts as a filter. And so this perspective have 3 sources that makes up its composition. And one of these sources is what is referred to as one cultural lens. And this last object, it symbolizes the outcome, the pattern, a man's totality of results. And as an OG taught me a long time ago, this creates a baseline. And this baseline drops the goods and exposes whether or not a man's flame, his mental capacity, wavers or flickers or stays steady. In which this is only possible if a man has reconnected back with his architect, this form and hand, which symbolizes the unmoved mover. And so from the vantage point of this street philosophy, when this isn't the case, then this is when a man is prone and is wide open to start dry snitching and telling on himself, divulging how inexperienced and naive he really is. For this reason, a seasoned practitioner of this craft can easily pinpoint when one of these kiosk game ambassadors is full of shit and talking out the side of their neck. You see, what exposes them is this barrage of information that comes from the influx of a multitude of activities. Depending on what's prevalent about these activities, this produces what stands above or what will stand below a man's baseline, triggering whether or not a man will start squealing and babbling on himself like a seasoned OG pulled my coat long time ago and put me up on game when he said, what doesn't come out in the wash definitely comes out in the rinse. Therefore, a practitioner who's seasoned is consciously aware of their own baseline. And this provides a no-nonsense bullshit detector as well. So, in deducting from what I just laid out and went over, whenever a man is game goofy as to what's prevalent about his baseline, then in addition to him dry snitching on himself, there is a multiple of spin-off and other oddities and mental blemishes that can pop up and dominate a man's life. All of this comes from being sloppy about one's mind over circumstances, obligations, and undertakings, which is the main topic of this episode and the essence of this concept called game. But this other square peg in a fucking round hole type of behavior I want to bring to your attention is the ineptitude, which is one of the many expressions that I just mentioned. But this ineptitude is when a man develops a live by proxy mentality. This living by proxy condition is when a man becomes extreme in his wishful thinking. And then he slips away into a form of romanticism that would make him fixated at deriving pleasure from someone else's success and accomplishments. Basically, it's a way of coping by throwing and dumping oneself into video games, as well as gouging on a variety of social media content and worthless activities. Dudes like these would develop a strange kind of self-worth. One can call it a low budget type of determinism. So peep this out. Outwardly, they will come off as being driven and gung-ho. But this goes back to what I brought up earlier about the ability to read a man's baseline. Even though to the casual observer, these kind of men is passionate as hell about certain things. But here's where the curveball comes in. These objectives have no pragmatic value. And whatever is made tangible by these kind of men would end up outside of their control and in someone else's hands. So this low budget type of determinism is in all actuality a page out of the Shiestism playbook. And so this low budget type of determinism is in reality a de facto form of treachery, whereas these kind of men becomes hell-bent and locked and loaded on undermining and chipping away at the success of something, someone, or a group of people, or to antagonize someone or a group of people that they oppose and has a disagreement with. It's a sad state of affairs and is a direct reason why a man must be laced up, because men shouldn't seek to know the world in itself, but should seek to know themselves through the world. And in order to accomplish what I just got through stating, real quick, zero in on this image I'm currently showing, because what I just got to stated, as for men knowing themselves, this requires a mind over circumstance proven type of philosophy, which is the essence of the concept called game. Now, here's the deal. A mind over circumstance type of philosophy on one end of the spectrum is all about making the impossible possible, and the opposite end of the same spectrum is all about controlling situations, or at the very least, controlling your reaction to situations. You see, this street philosophy called game and how life transpires upon this chessboard is nuanced and complex. But even though it is nuanced and complex, it is not complicated. Only if you possess a square outlook and a square worldview would you consider it complicated. So one of the essential requirements that this life demands from you is for you to have a thorough understanding surrounding the concept of complexity and its workings. As a direct result of what I just stated, it is mandatory if a man is going to implement and put into service a mind over circumstance way of doing things, to control and to master his own thoughts, bouncing and zipping around to and fro inside of his own head and his own mental space. First and foremost, for one to properly comprehend a mind over circumstance type of philosophy, one must know the difference between what constitutes a thought and what constitutes the process we call thinking. Most individuals use these two terms interchangeably, and this is a grave and costly mistake that throws a monkey wrench into any legitimate and proper understanding about how this world, this society, and your place in it truly works, and will permanently get you a lifelong ticket on the perpetual hamster wheel where you will remain stuck just mentally spinning your fucking wheels. So thoughtz is a phenomenon, a loop-to-loop boomerang, one can say, which acts passively and automatically, where one's thinking process is active and calculating. Therefore, from a gameologist's point of view, a thought is a mental reoccurrence, a loop-to-loop process that is a stand-in in a series of Trojan horses that has significance and correspondence to our needs, our attachments, our wants, obligations, plans, etc. Earlier in this episode, I highlighted the importance of a man being up to speed and fully dialed in on what's prevalent and foremost as it concerns his baseline, and that when this is working in his favor, then this baseline pulls multiple duties and becomes a no-nonsense bullshit detector and indicator on what doesn't pass the smell test. Of prime importance in making this a reality is a man's sway and upper hand he has over the quality of him remaining front sight focused. Being front sight focused is a necessity to sift and sort from among various details loosely knitted together by some logical process that is dumped in and loosely scattered, making up a man's cascades of thoughts that he is contending with on a regular basis. So the more equipped a man is at being front sight focused, then the more coherent thoughts will push their way through, bypassing the ones that isn't as concise, so they can contribute and provides benefit as a man maneuvers across this chessboard we call life. Swinging back to the point that I made a few moments ago on controlling and mastering one's own thoughts, which then allow one to implement a mind over circumstance type of philosophy, which is the essence of game. But the point that kicks this into gear is the concept of like attracts like, and how this concept is ever present. You see, your thoughts, your loop-to-loop, these consistent drum beats echoing around loosely in your head, regardless if these drum beats are negative, positive, or neutral, they fulfill their mission in influencing you on how you relate to yourself and the social dynamic around you. As a byproduct of this fact, you are unconsciously forming identities that are frequently constructed and many times straight up false. All of this affects your behavior, emotions, and feelings. For this reason, it's the duty of a man who considers himself to be a practitioner of this craft to take advantage of this organically constructed magnet, their like attract like mechanism. And this comes down to one of the most valuable commodities a practitioner have at their disposal. And this precious commodity is their self-referencing dialogue, self-talk, as is commonly referred to. This self-talk, this self-referencing dialogue, from a street philosopher perspective, that is, but the legitimacy of the effectiveness of this concept known as self-talk is verified by a medical proven reality referred to as the placebo effect. Peep out this image that is currently being shown. This self-referencing dialogue, it works like this. So time and time again, individuals will get, let's say, a damn tummy ache or whatever. So they will scurry their asses into their doctor office and say, doctor. And after chit-chatting with some medical professional, bam, they're back to normal, back to acting chipper and everything like nothing never was wrong in the first place. This is the power of this self-referencing dialogue, self-talk, as it's commonly referred to. But like everything, nothing happens within a vacuum, especially when it comes to this no-nonsense street philosophy referred to as the concept called game. So game falls up under the umbrella of what's no-nonsense and pragmatic. Then what is consequential is going to be a driving factor on implementing this concept of self-referencing dialogue. So one of the most effective ways to exercise the development of how one can pinpoint the outcome of things is, of course, the game of chess. As I do, I highlight the pragmatic skills embedded within the game of chess and show how they can be applied to this street philosophy, ergo throwing the odds of winning into the favor of a practicing practitioner of this street craft. Therefore, the game of chess requires a chess player to log into their comprehension how each move upon the chessboard can be described by a series of letters and numbers. So a well-schooled chess player knows how to designate certain factors on the chessboard by itemizing them by category, which is called notations. And so by the same token, practitioners of this street craft utilize a similar no-nonsense approach in applying this concept of self-referencing or self-talk, as it's commonly referred to. Check out this brand new image I have showing at this moment. Now, to have the ability to determine what's consequential, one must be efficient at properly categorizing and itemizing things and subject matters into their proper places and standings. So from a gameologist's perspective, one's internal dialogue comes from three major categories. And to reemphasize what I have said multiple times before on other episodes of the Chronicles of Gameology, and that is, when it comes to this chessboard we call life, it is saturated with conflict, excessive competition, and illogical occurrences. And the objective of a practicing gameologist is to bring balance and cooperation back to the social dynamic, this chessboard, where these three dominant factors are running roughshod and in full control. But a practicing gameologist knows how to square the circle and put these three factors in check and bring synergy and functionality back to the playing field and reap the benefits along the way. With that being said, getting back to these three major categories. Now, all of this ruckus and mayhem that I just got through describing, a version of what I just laid out, is intertwined within a man's internal dialogue and these three categories, because this conflict doesn't just happen upon the social dynamic. It takes place internally between a man's dialogue and these three categories. Now, taking all of this into account as to how conflict and illogical occurrences is alive and kicking within your own internal dialogue, the stage have been properly set, and I'm figuring that enough ice cold water have been used to get your undivided attention as to what's at stake. And so in order for a man to participate in this street craft and get control of his thoughts, which is a crucial first step before one ever start utilizing the other goodies and advantages that a mind over circumstance type of philosophy provides, then a man must be efficient at editing and policing the constant jibber jabber and conversations transpiring between these three categories in a man's unconscious awareness. While I'm at it, let me break down and show how all of this impacts and ties back into controlling your thoughts. When there are discrepancies and conflict coming from either of these three categories, then this can produce the wayward thoughts that you are bombarded with. So for instance, sadness is accompanied by thoughts of loss. Anger involves thoughts that is tethered with violations of certain standards that you have set for yourself and drawn in the sand for others not to violate, so to speak. Now, refocusing back upon this image so I can give you a thorough overview of how all of this transpires. Starting from the bottom left circle, which is labeled crumb snatchers. This is your internal dialogue that gives you your hunches and ideas geared towards your claims and must-haves you are hell-bent on making a reality. But these hunches and ideas usually doesn't come with any foresight and doesn't take into consideration their relationship to your overall social environment. Now, moving to the bottom right circle, this is labeled a chip off the old block. This is your internal dialogue that gives you your rules and cultural norms. Remember early in this episode when I was breaking down and describing this cosmology, and I was mentioning that your perspective have three sources that make up its composition, and one of these sources is your cultural lens. This category that I'm speaking of now, they both tie back into one another. And this last circle, this top circle, sitting on the top of the other two, this is labeled grown folk shit, which is your internal dialogue that attempts to balance the contradictions and illogical occurrences that the other two, the crumb snatcher and the chip off the old block, has a track record of making. This is where your code, your Bushido, kicks in and comes from. Let me reposition and paint this picture for you like this. Going back to the circle label crumb snatcher, this represents your belief. And I mean belief in a disparaging type of way, because a man should never have a fucking belief system. It's his duty once he goes into adolescence to start developing and accumulating a knowing system. Now, this crumb snatcher category, which represents your early upbringing, a lot of its content was hammered home surrounding how you should just acquiesce and roll over and show your damn belly on a lot of social issues. So for example, a lot of men's moms would push the line to their sons. Also a lot of game goofy fathers as well, but a lot of moms who have a lot of renegade energy bottle up inside of them, but they will push the foolishness and sentiment that it is proper and of good character to give girls and chicks the benefit of the doubt all the time. And we all know how detrimental this piece of advice have played out for a lot of men. Once again, as you can see, being gamed up provides multiple advantages. One of these advantages is a heightened awareness, which delivers to a practitioner the skill set to be aware of when unproductive patterns have taken control and is now in the driver's seat. Another powerful asset that is provided to a practicing practitioner, which comes from being in control of their internal dialogue, is a genuine feedback mechanism, commonly referred to as your gut. But this alerts you immediately to the existence of negative thought patterns roaming around in your head. This is detected by the emergence of when you feel tense, depressed, and even unmotivated. To summarize and bring this to a close, but without question, just to give you heads up, know that I have barely scratched the surface as it pertains to this subject matter of how the mind can dominate its circumstances, which is the backbone and essence, by the way, of this concept called game. And to re-emphasize a crucial element that I brought up earlier on this episode, and this is the fact that an undisciplined noodle imprints more wrinkles and wear and tear and erosion upon a man's mind than it ever could and is capable of carrying out by showing his presence on his face and his outer appearance. And you can say that all of this starts and ends and hinges on whether he has secured an eye of the tiger type of focus, for the sheer fact that when there isn't any schooling on instructing a man properly on the sweet science of cultivating the ability to be front sight focused, you better be assured that there are going to be abundance of propaganda that would be a substitute and a designated hitter that would make it its business to deprave and downgrade a man's mind instead. Now, that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode.